By the summer of 1914, each of the great nations of Europe were flush with the manpower and materials of war. At no time during its long history, even during the Napoleonic period, have Europe's nations been so prepared for war. In Britain, King George V ruled over the world's most powerful navy and the world's largest colonial empire. In Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, the first cousin of George V, reigned over the world's most powerful army and Europe's largest industrial capacity. In Russia, Tsar Nicholas II, also a first cousin to both George and Wilhelm, ruled over the world's single largest contiguous empire, stretching from Eastern Europe to the northern extents of the Pacific Ocean. Since the close of the Franco-Prussian War of 1871, the European nation-states had been jockeying for an advantage over their rivals, as the smoke-filled backrooms of the diplomatic halls across the continent were in a constant state of vigor. By 1914, two great alliances had emerged. The Western European nations had formed the Triple Entente, consisting of Russia, France, and to a lesser extent, Great Britain. In opposition to the Triple Entente were the Central Powers nations consisting of Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Kingdom of Italy. Each had pledged to the other member states within its alliance to aid one another defensively in the event of war. However, the signatories were not obligated to participate in any offensive conflicts that their fellow nations might undertake. Some of Europe's smaller nations like Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Serbia made unofficial pacts with the senior members of Europe, but these agreements were not made public. In the Near East, the antiquated Ottoman Empire ruled over vast swathes of land stretching from the Sinai Peninsula to the Caucasus Mountains. Unbeknownst to the Western Allies, the Ottoman Turks had made a secret alliance with Germany and would come to the aid of the Central Powers once hostilities had commenced. With all the great powers of Europe being aligned with one of the alliances, it would only take a spark to set the European continent ablaze in the fires of war. That spark would be lit in the Bosnian city of Sarajevo. On June 28th of the same year, the Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was visiting the provisional capital of Bosnia when a radical 19-year-old put a bullet into his chest, thus setting off a chain of events that changed the face of Europe and the world forever.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Solo Gamers Club. I've received several requests for more coverage of Kirk Ullman's The Lamps Are Going Out, and so I've decided to revisit this title once again. For this video, I've created a new version of my player oracle, which will help me to make in-game decisions when they're required. It functions by posing a question to the oracle and rolling or selecting the probability for that action to be affirmed, either likely, 50-50, or unlikely. A d12 is rolled and then cross-referenced with the probability column that was selected. This will ultimately approve or disapprove an action in varying degrees of success or failure. As I enjoy playing the Central Powers, I'll use the oracle to help me direct the forces of the Triple Entente. In this playthrough, the Central Powers will be rolling the black dice, and the Triple Entente will be rolling white. I've created a few player aids to help me with the playthrough, and the first set is a collection of tokens that will direct the turn sequence. We've got Germany, then the Western Allies, then the Eastern Allies, and finally the Central Allies. And we'll just cycle those tokens as we go through, and that will help us keep on track for whose turn it is. I've also created a few tokens to help me to display the neutral countries. On the front side, we have the portrait and the national flag of whoever the regent of that country is. As an example, in Greece, we have Constantine I. Greece begins the game as neutral, so we've got those tokens for that. And I've also done the same for the primary belligerents in the game. We have Wilhelm II of Germany, George V in England, Albert I in Belgium, and etc. That's just to kind of brighten up the game a little bit. And with that said, let's get started with the playthrough. We begin with turn 1, and that's fall of 1914. During the opening turn, Germany must adhere to its pre-war plan known as the Schlieffen Plan. This plan provides several advantages to Germany during the opening turn, but also places some limitations on its ability to act on the Eastern Front. The plan's primary benefit will allow Germany 2 rerolls while making its attacks in Belgium or northern France. Its secondary benefit will provide Germany with a one-time production point bonus during turn 1 of the production phase if Belgium is controlled. Its negative aspects will restrict Germany from moving more than one unit from either Hanover or the Rhine into Posen or Prussia. This usually has no effect on Germany, as they will be using both of their movements to transfer armies into Hanover for their attack into Belgium. However, its primary restriction is that a maximum of one army may be constructed in Posen or Prussia during the first production phase. So that is going to give Russia a very good chance at pushing us back out of Prussia. The German pre-war planning will give Germany a bona fide chance of occupying not only Belgium, but the Somme. If Germany can expel the Triple Entente from the Somme, French production will suffer, reducing it from 4 to 3 during the Western Allies' very first production phase. Very often, the Western Allies will utilize the "they shall not pass" rule in an attempt to prevent this loss. However, this can be a death blow to France later in the war. Every effort must be made to drive the Triple Entente out of the Somme. However, several random elements may make this more or less probable. First depends on Germany's event card draw. If Germany pulls first-line formations, this will give a German army a +2 dice roll modifier during any combat. In this event, it should be used during the initial attack into Belgium to secure the big push counter. Alternately, it can be used to build a trench even during 1914, but the card's offensive benefits make the trenches option pale in comparison. The trench might be built in Prussia, and that would greatly increase Germany's ability to resist the likely Russian attack in that location. If the Hindenburg-Ludendorff team or East Asia Squadron cards are drawn, a 2 in 3 chance, Germany will have to rely on its 2 rerolls for victory. In order to take the Somme, Germany will need to win 5 battles in a row, 3 to drive out the BEF and the Belgian armies in Belgium, and 2 in the Somme to spend and defeat the French Fifth Army. Any defeat will nullify any German hope of occupying northern France during the first turn. The next random element is solely based on the defensive rolls of the Triple Entente. If the Triple Entente rolls high on their defense rolls, especially during the opening attack, this can have a catastrophic effect on the German timetable, as the German rerolls can only be used to reroll their own attack dice. In the event that the Western Allies rolls a 6 during the initial attack, Germany will need a 6 to win the opening battle, providing that the first-line formations event is not in play. If this occurs, Germany has little option other than to spend both rerolls in the hope of winning the opening battle and gaining the coveted big push counter. In the East, Germany has the misfortune of having only one viable army available for action. If the Hindenburg-Ludendorff team event card is drawn, the 8th Army should immediately launch an attack into Brest-Litovsk to preemptively undermine the strength of the Russian attack later in the turn. If any other event is drawn, Germany will need to stand pat in the east and hopefully retain possession of Prussia following the Eastern Allies' turn. At sea, the choice to sally forth with the German High Seas Fleet during turn 1 should be taken only after much soul-searching. The German High Seas Fleet, even if it remains in port for the entire length of the war, provides several important benefits. First, it prevents any Triple Entente attempts at conducting an amphibious invasion against Belgium. If this is exercised when the Central Powers do not expect it, it can have a catastrophic result for Germany. Secondly, it forces Britain to use its precious resources to repair its naval assets if it's used against the East Asia Squadron or if dealing with the Austro-Hungarian fleet or the Gallipoli landings. So caution is the word of the day regarding the commitment of the Kaiser's treasured fleet, especially during the first turn. As for the U-boats, I see little reason not to utilize the unrestricted warfare rules during the opening turn. The chances of tainting the U.S.-German relations are minimal, and the benefits far exceed the risks. In the production phase, assuming Germany occupies Belgium during turn 1, they'll have 13 production points to spend during the first turn. 5 will be needed to refresh the armies in Belgium or the Somme. Another must be used to refresh the 7th Army in the Rhine. Another 1 or 2 will be required to refresh the 8th and 9th Armies on the Eastern Front. This will leave Germany with 5 or 6 points of discretionary spending during the first turn. At a minimum, Germany must build 2 fresh armies, one in the Rhine and another in Prussia. Strong consideration must be given to building a 2nd army in the Rhine, either spent or preferably full strength, even at the expense of foregoing the refit of U-boats or sending aid to Austria-Hungary. If France expels German forces from the Rhine, a result which I painfully experienced during my last playthrough, it will likely result in a lights out for any hope of Central Powers victory. The damage is simply too great. And we'll get started with the first turn for Germany, and we'll begin with the event card draw. Germany draws East Asia Squadron. That is a 1914 to 1915 card. And we're going to place the East Asia Squadron token near the British Isles. So we'll place that East Asia Squadron's token near the British Isles, and that'll be a reminder for us for later in the turn. And this represents that squadron commanded by Admiral Spee in the Far East. And Britain will have to decide if they're going to weaken their blockade to go after his East Asia Squadron. And we'll find out about that later in the turn. Next is Germany's movement phase, and we're going to use that to redeploy 2 armies from the Rhine into Hanover, and we'll move in the 4th and 5th armies into Hanover, and that's going to form our main attack force for our attack into Belgium and hopefully into the Somme. I'm not going to be committing our high seas fleet at this point, so we will leave the British home fleet in the blockade box unopposed, and we'll leave our subs in the unrestricted warfare box. And now it is our combat phase, and we would resolve our naval combat if we had any, and we're also going to resolve some guerrilla combat, which is a special option for our force in East Africa. We have 2 options for our forces in East Africa. Currently we have Leda Vorbeck's force in Tonga, and he can either launch a standard attack, which would give him a +2 to his dice roll, or he can launch a guerrilla attack. And we're going to select the guerrilla attack. That will not spend his force, but he has a chance on damaging the British East African Army, and that's what we're going to do. So we need a 5 or 6 on this to get success, and here's his roll. And he rolled a 2, so we have failed in that. He'll remain unspent, but the British East African Army is also unspent. And now comes our attacks on the Western Front. And to begin the attack, I'm going to nominate the German 4th Army, and that will be attacking the Belgian 1st Army. So we're going to spend that 4th Army, and we're going to roll the dice. Now Germany will win on ties, but there are no dice roll modifiers at this time. So here is the roll against the Belgians. And we've won 6-3. That is going to spend the Belgian army And more importantly, we are going to gain our big push counter. It's going to give us a +1 for all future attacks in that area from Hanover into Belgium. Now we're going to nominate our 5th Army. That'll be spent. That's going to attack the BEF, and this will be the Battle of Mons. Germany will gain +1 for the big push. And we've won 4-2. That is going to spend the BEF, and we're going to continue the assault using the German 1st Army, and we'll attempt to drive them out of Belgium. Okay, here is the 1st Army's attack on the BEF at Mons, +1. And unfortunately, we have lost 5-6, so we're going to have to use one of our big pushes. And I'm sorry, one of our rerolls rather. And that's what we'll do. So here's the first reroll. And we've done it. We have a 5 that's modified to a 6. And we have successfully driven Triple Entente out of Belgium. So these forces will have to retreat. They have no option other than to move into the Somme. And we are going to occupy Belgium with all of our forces. Now we have 2 unspent armies at this point. And those are going to hopefully be able to drive out the remainder. Now we lose our big push counter at the moment. And we've already spent 1 reroll, so we have 1 left. Albert I is driven out into exile, and we'll place him in the British Isles. And we're going to continue our assault, and we are going to nominate the German 2nd Army, and that is going to attack the French 5th, which is the only unspent army there. So we're going to spend ours, and we're going to roll our dice and see what happens. We need to get a success here. We have 1 reroll remaining. Here is the roll. Germany has won 4-3. That is going to spend the French army. French 5th is spent. We're going to gain our big push counter. And the German 3rd is going to attempt to drive back the Allies. They're going to use the French army, the French 5th, because in the event that the Germans win this battle, the French do have the option of using that special rule, the stand and die rule, where they can prevent the retreat of all the other forces by sacrificing a army. In this case, it has to be a French army because we are in French territory, and it has to be either a production site or a white flag site. So we're going to spend the German 3rd, and we'll see what happens. We have 1 reroll remaining. We're going to gain +1. Here is the roll. And we've won the battle, 4-2. That will drive the Allies into retreat, and we have to decide now if the Allies are going to use that special rule to try to prevent the retreat. Now that special rule is known as They Shall Not Pass, Rule 7.2.4. This option can only be chosen if the unit is defending in its own nation's home area that has the flag icon or a production area. If the defending player is required to retreat from an eligible area, he may declare a last-ditch stand and attempt to avoid retreating at the cost of permanently eliminating the defending army. The defender may exercise this option with each separate attack until he runs out of units. If the defending player chooses this option, he announces his intention to do so after the combat result that caused the retreat. The unit must make a tenacity test. The defending player rolls a die, subtracting 1 from the die for each permanently eliminated army of the same nation that has been lost to this point in the game for any reason. If the net roll is 2 or higher, the test is passed and the retreat is canceled. So we're going to have to decide if France is going to use this option. Now this totally destroys, in this case, the 5th Army. It will never be able to be rebuilt during the game, and that can have some serious consequences for France. So we're going to make a oracle roll and see what the oracle says. Now this is a major decision for the Western Allies. I would think that this would be an unlikely possibility. It's extremely damaging to lose an army in this game that you cannot rebuild. So I would think that they would probably deem this to be an unlikely probability, but we'll see what happens. We're going to roll a d12, and we're looking for, this is a simple yes or no. The question is, do we use that rule to try to forego the retreat? Here's the roll. The roll is a 1, and that is a affirmed no, no and. So they are not going to use the rule. The forces will retreat into Paris. So the Western Allies are in full retreat. We have an option now to retreat into either Paris or into Verdun, but in this case I think we are going to put all of these forces into Paris. I think that makes the most sense. And Germany is going to move their entire force into the Somme. Now, Belgium has been conquered, so the Belgian army can never be rebuilt. But what it can do is, during the Western Allies production phase, they can merge with the BEF to reconstitute that at no cost, and then the Belgian First Army would be removed. So that's where we're at right now. And the Kaiser's forces have operated precisely as what we intended, and that was without the first line formations, which would have made this even much easier. Now we do have the German 6th Army in the Rhine, and we could have them follow up on this successful attack in the Somme by trying to take out one of the French armies defending Verdun. But I think we might be better served, if we're going to do that, to use that on the Eastern Front and maybe have the 8th Army launch a preemptive attack in Brest-Litovsk and try to take out a Russian army that would be coming against us. We'll move to the Eastern Front and check that out. Oh, and incidentally, we should place a Central Powers control marker in Belgium to remind us that we own Belgium. Now on the Eastern Front, we do have the 8th Army in Prussia, and we could have that do a preemptive attack in Brest-Litovsk. If we were successful, that would be one less army that the Russians would be able to come at us with. We're going to be able to rebuild the 8th Army if it, when it is spent, and we can also build a second army there that will be within the provisions of the Schlieffen Plan. So I think we will try that. We're going to launch an attack into Brest-Litovsk. The 8th Army will be spent, and we'll be targeting the Russian 2nd Army. We'll see what happens. And here's the attack roll for the 8th Army. And they were successful. They won 6-2, and that is going to spend the Russian 2nd Army. We can't follow the attack up. We have no other unspent forces on that front, but I think that was a good result for us. That's great. And we're going to move on now to the production phase. And the first step that we have is we check the blockade box. Britain has the blockade in place, so that won't change. We're going to resolve our U-boat attrition, though. During the U-boat attrition phase, we're going to consult the U-boat attrition table. We're going to roll 2 dice for each unspent U-boat in the either box, and this will tell us the status of whether they will have accrued some losses during the opening conflict or not. Okay, here is the roll. Roll is a 5, and that is spent. So the active German U-boat is going to be spent, and we're going to have to pay to reconstitute that. All right. Well, with the conquest of Belgium, Germany will have a total of 13 production during this turn. Their normal 12 plus the 1-point bonus for Belgium. We're going to spend 5 production points, and we're going to refit all of our armies in the Somme, getting those back up to full strength. We're also going to spend 1 point to construct the 7th Army, getting that up to full speed. That leaves us with a total of 7 production points. We're going to spend a total of 2 to refit the 9th Army in Posen and the 8th Army in Prussia. That'll cost us 2. That leaves us with a total of 5 production points. And now we have to decide if we want to refit our U-boats. Now we have 5 production points left, so I think what we're going to do is I'm not going to refit those U-boats at this time. What I'm going to do is we'll go right into constructing new units. And we're going to build the 14th Army in Prussia. That'll cost us 2 points, leaving us with 3. And then we're going to construct a new army, the 17th in the Rhine. That'll cost us 2. That leaves us with 1 point. And I think what we're going to do is the option, I think we will do it. I'm going to construct the spent 12th Army in the Rhine. That's going to use up all of our production points. Now, an argument could be made that instead of doing that, we should repair one of our U-boats. And that's something I'm going to have to think about if I should go back and do that or not. And I think I will. If we can't get a full-strength army in the Rhine, it really won't help us in defending that area. So I think we'll forego the creation of the spent 12th Army, and I'm going to use that last point to refit one of our U-boats. And that will give us 1 active U-boat at least during the Western Allies' turn. And that's going to complete our production spending. The Austrians are going to be on their own. We have no money left to transfer to them. So we'll move on to our technological advances, and we'll take care of our research. We're going to draw the top card of our technology deck and see what we get. If it's a level 1 technology, we can keep it. Germany draws counter battery C1. Field phones and wireless communications. The Imperial German Army was an early adopter of wireless and phone communications to help coordinate movement of troops and increase the accuracy of artillery. Germany and Austria-Hungary place 1 heavy artillery unit each that can trace supply by land to a home area. Roll 2 dice when attacking or defending. Flip to the fired side. All right, that is great. And so we have to decide where we're going to place this heavy artillery. Now this can be used in offensive or defensive capacity. So normally I would place that heavy artillery on the Western Front. But I'm wondering if I should place that in Prussia. And that would be very helpful in performing our defense against the coming Russian onslaught. So I'm going to think about that. Secondarily is the Austro-Hungarian heavy artillery. We could place that in either against Serbia or in Galicia against the Russians. So we'll have to think about that. I think for the Austrians, I'm going to place that heavy artillery unit in Galicia. And we'll probably try to use that offensively against the Russians. The Serbs, knowing what happened on the Western Front, England's not going to have a lot of money left to help support them. So I don't know if we have to worry about the Serbs too much during this first turn. We'll see what happens. Now as for the German heavy artillery unit, I guess I'm going to place that on the Western Front. We had damaged a Russian army already previously in Brest-Litovsk that will limit their ability to strike at us. So I'm going to count on that, I guess, as the logic for placing that artillery on the Western Front. So we'll move to the regroup phase, and we would determine air superiority at this point if there were anyone with air technology, and we would reset our heavy artillery. All of the artillery is ready to go. That is going to complete Germany's opening turn for fall 1914. And the Central Powers have a resounding success so far, and we'll have to see what happens with the Western Allies' response. So we'll switch our turn sequence marker to the Western Allies, and they are going to be active next. And we'll begin with the Western Allies event card phase. Western Allies draw first line formations 1914 to 1915. Place on a Western Allies army Dice roll modifier +2 in any combat. All right. And I think we're going to place that on the French 6th Army. And now we'll move on to the Western Allies movement phase. And I'm pretty sure France is going to move at least one army from Verdun in to help defend Paris. And the question is, would they move another unit in there? We have the total of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 9th Army, which is spent. I think they would. So they'll also move the 2nd Army into Paris as well. And now we'll move on to the combat phase, and the Royal Navy is going to have to decide what it's going to do with the East Asia Squadron. Now during the combat phase, the Western Allies can attempt to remove that East Asia Squadron by spending a British fleet and making a die roll of 3 or higher. So I think they will attempt to do that. So they're going to commit one of the fleets that are blockading Germany, and they're going to spend that force and attempt to get rid of von Spey's East Asia Squadron. They will die, and they need a 3 or higher to be successful. Here is their roll. They did it. They rolled a 4, and that is going to destroy Spey's East Asia Squadron, and they would have caught up with that at the Falkland Islands and dispatched his force. All right. Now the Western Allies have to make the decision if they're going to counterattack in the Somme and attempt to whittle down some of those German armies that are bearing down on Paris. They have a couple armies they can use. They have the 1st and 2nd French armies in Paris and the 3rd and 4th French armies in Verdun. Now, French production is going to be cut down to only 3 points this turn, so they will only be able to repair a total of 3 armies, and right now they have a total of 3 that are spent. The French 5th, French 6th, and the French 9th in Verdun. That would be all of their production to just repair those armies, so we'll have to do a little soul searching with this. And I think we're going to let the Oracle determine this, and our question is, do the French counterattack in the Somme? And we'll make the D12 roll, and I think this would be a 50-50. So we'll use the 50-50 column and see what happens. The roll is an 8, and it says yes, but. And that says the idea is approved, but only in a diminished form. So I think they would limit these attacks to only 1 or possibly 2 attacks. So France is going, now Germany has that heavy artillery unit that they can use in defensively if they choose to. So we'll have to see what happens with that. And I think the French 2nd Army is going to launch an attack into the Somme. So we're going to spend the French 2nd and we'll make our rolls. Now Germany can decide to use its heavy artillery defensively. And I think they will forego that for the time being, so we'll see what happens here. France is going to launch their attack. There are no modifiers. They will win on ties. Here is the roll. And France has won 6-1. That is going to spend the German 5th Army, and the French are going to gain the big push counter. We'll give them that from Paris. Now, whether they continue this assault or not is a good question. You might need to use the Oracle again for that. And we'll ask the Oracle a yes or no question, and that is, does France continue the counterattack into the Somme? And this will be just a yes or no question. So that's all we'll be looking at is yes or no, and I'll make this a 50-50. Roll is a 7, and that's yes. Okay, so they will do it. They're going to commit their 1st Army with the big push. So they're going to spend the French 1st with the big push. And now Germany's got to decide if they want to use their heavy artillery or not. That's a tough decision. If they do, they can roll 2 dice and take the better of the results. That is a tough decision for Germany. I think Germany will hold off on using that, and France will make the attack, and they will have a +1 to the result for the big push. Here is their roll. And they rolled a 5 + 1 is 6. Germany rolled a 6, and that's enough to win. And the German First Army is spent. That's all the attacks they can make from Paris. They have no other unspent units available to them there. And then the question remains is, would they continue the attack from a different location? They only have 2 unspent armies in Verdun, so I would doubt it. I think their counterattacks were sufficient. That would only give Germany basically 3 active armies to use at the start of the next turn, and we're going to have at least that many unspent armies in Paris, so that should be enough to protect Paris, I think. So I think they will cease their attacks. And I almost forgot about the Allies' Plan 17 mandates. France is going to have to make an attack into the Rhine at a -1 dice roll modifier. So we're going to nominate the French 3rd to make the attack on the German trenches. Now, if they're able to successfully penetrate those trenches, the Third Army will not be spent. But if they fail to do this, they will be spent. So we're going to be rolling the dice. Now, the trenches are in the mountains, so they're going to get a +1. French will be at a -1. Okay, here is the roll. And the French have won 5-3. So the German trenches are breached, and that would fulfill France's Plan 17 requirements. And I think that's where we're going to stop right there. We'll go with the victory that we have, 7-3, and we'll end it there. Now, the British could launch an attack in East Africa and attempt to damage Letov-Vorbeck there. The problem is they need to probably spend quite a bit in transfers to France to stabilize that front, so I think they would stand pat in East Africa. But we'll ask the Oracle, and we'll say, does the British East African Army attack in Tonga? And this will be a yes, no, and I would think this to be unlikely, so we'll use the unlikely category. Here's the roll. Roll is a 10, and it says yes, but. So this was a yes or no, and I guess they will launch the attack. So the British East African force will attack Letov-Vorbeck in Tonga. There's no advantage here. Here's the roll. The British have won 6-1. Letov-Vorbeck is spent, and so is the British East African force. Now, as we know, it's very difficult for Vorbeck to be resupplied with the blockade in place. And that there is a card, I believe, in the 1916 set that will allow him to be refreshed, but not readily. So British have done their duty. And I think that's going to complete our combat operations for the Western Allies. So we'll go to our production phase. The blockade is still in place, and we're going to resolve the U-boat attacks. Germany has 1 unspent U-boat in the unrestricted warfare box. So the Allies are going to roll 2d6, and we'll see what the results of their activities in the North Atlantic are. Here is the roll. Roll is a 3, and that says success if Western Allies U-2 technology not active. And that is the case. So that German U-boat is going to impact the British economy, and they're going to lose 1 production point. We'll place that in the British Isles as a reminder. And we'll begin now with our production spending. France gets a total of 4 production, but they lose 1 because of the German capture of the Somme. So they have 3 production points available for this turn. And I think they're going to spend those to reconstruct these armies in Paris. I think what they'll do is they're going to use the Belgian First Army to reconstruct the French Sixth Army. That will permanently remove the Belgian army from the game, but the French Sixth is completely reformatted. That's a free action. And I think what they'll do now is they'll spend the remaining 3 points refitting armies. They'll refit the 5th and the 1st. That'll give a total of 3 unspent armies in Paris at this time. Germany would have a maximum of only 4 in their attacking force unless they moved in other armies. So I think what we'll do is we'll spend an additional point, and I'll have to decide if it's going to be in Paris or in Verdun. I misspoke. Germany only has 3 unspent armies in the Somme right now. So the most they could bring in would be to transfer 2 armies into that area, and that would give them a total attack force of 5 armies plus the heavy artillery. So we have to plan for that potentially as what the attack on Paris would be. So let's think about that. Right now we have only 1 production point left, and it's a matter of spending that to reconstruct either the French Second in Paris or one of those armies in Verdun. Either way, it is a tough decision. And I think we'll let the Oracle decide this. And the question is, it'll be a yes-no, do we reconstruct the French Second Army in Paris? And I would think that to be likely. So we'll make the roll on the likely table. Roll is a 3, and that's no. But, so it's a no, and that means that that point will be spent to reconstruct the French army in Verdun. So we're going to use that point to reconstruct the 9th. That'll spend all of France's production points during this turn. We'll move on now to England. Now Britain has a normal production value of 7, but they've lost 1 point to U-boat attacks, so they're down to 6, and they have to decide what they're going to do. They're definitely going to spend 1 point to refit the BEF. That'll cost them 1 point. That leaves them with 5. And I think the thing to do would be to construct the British Second Army in England. That'll cost us 2 points. And we'll be able to at least send that by sea to France. So we'll construct the British Second Army. That's going to cost us 2 points, leaving us with a total of 3 production. And then we have to decide what we want to do now. We have a spent British fleet, and I think that's important enough for us to spend that point there. So they're going to spend a point to reconstruct that British fleet that went after Spey's force. That leaves us with 2. Now we have a spent British East African army, but it's really not, well, it would be in danger because if Letov Vorbeck attacks even in a spent force, if he rolls a 6, we would be forced into retreat and they will win the East African campaign. So I guess we have really not much of an option. They're going to spend a point to reconstruct the British East Africa force. It leaves us with 1 point, and I guess we're going to use that as a transfer to France. So we're going to give them a 1 point transfer, and I think that's how we're going to do this. We'll have to see if that is the correct way or not. I think Paris is fairly safe. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 armies in there. One of them being the first line formations French 6th Army, which would give us a +2 dice roll modifier on defense or attack. So I think that is what we're going to do. And we'll move on now to the technological advances, and we'll do our research for the Western Allies. They drew the card A2 that's planned barrages. They're not going to be able to keep that because they need to have the A1 technology first. It does say at the bottom, if the opponent has A2, you may take A1. Well, they don't. So that card will be reshuffled back into their technology deck. No help there. And we would move on now to our regroup phase. There are no air superiority rolls that need to be made, and there's no allied heavy artillery. So that will bring the Western Allies' turn to a close, and we're going to move on now to our Eastern Allies. And we'll begin with the Eastern Allies event draw. And they draw the card Entente Pressures Serbia 1914 card. Dice roll modifier +2. First attack this turn by a Serbian army against an Austro-Hungarian army. All right. And we'll leave that Entente Pressures Serbia card near Serbia as a reminder. It's going to give them a +2 DRM. We'll move on now to the movement phase for the Eastern Allies. And we'll take care of the Eastern Allies movement. And I think for sure they're going to move the 4th Russian Army from Estonia. The question is where do we put it? Either in Lithuania, Brest-Litovsk, or the Ukraine. And we'll have to think about that. I think we'll let the Oracle decide this, and the question will be do the Russians move the 4th Russian Army to Brest-Litovsk? If it's a yes, then it will go there. If it's a no, we'll put it in Lithuania. And I would say this is a 50-50 chance, so here is the roll. Rolls a 4, and that's a no, so it's going to go into Lithuania. All right. I think that's going to be all of the Russian moves. We could make an argument to move a Russian army from Ukraine into either of the two attack areas, Brest-Litovsk or Lithuania. Or it could even be put into Poland. That is a possibility. Problem is you have 4 unspent Austro-Hungarian armies with a heavy artillery unit in Galicia, so I don't know if they can really weaken the Ukraine any more than it is. Now the Russian production for this turn is going to be a total of 4 points. So that would allow them to build up to 2 new armies or refit up to 4 spent armies. Right now Russia has 1 spent army, so that would allow them to refit another army and build another one. So we'll have to take it under consideration with those realities. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll wait on the Serbians. Serbians are definitely going to take advantage of that card, and they're going to have the Serbian 2nd Army launch an attack, I think, into Hungary. So the Austro-Hungarian 5th Army will defend. So the Serbs are going to gain a +2. So here is the roll. Serbia rolls an 8. The Austro-Hungarians roll a 1, and they are spent. That is going to give them the big push counter. And we have to decide if Serbia would continue that. Now, they're not going to be getting any support from anyone, so they won't be able to refit their armies. So any success by Austro-Hungary into Serbia would force them into retreat. So I don't think they will do that. So the question becomes, where and with what forces do the Russians attack Germany in Prussia? And I think the smartest play would probably be to use the forces in Lithuania. Now, we can make one attack and we'd still be able to refit our spent armies on that front and still build an additional army. So I think we will do that, and we will nominate the Russian 1st in Lithuania to attack the German 8th in Prussia. Here is the roll. And unfortunately, Germany has won that attack 4-3. That is going to spend the Russian 1st. German 8th remains intact. And I think that's going to be the extent of Russian offensive actions in the east. Russia is going to gain a total of 4 production points, none for Serbia. So we will see how they're going to spend those. Russian production is at 4, and they're going to spend 2 points to refit the 2nd and 1st armies, that's for sure. So that'll leave them with 2 production points. That's enough to build a fresh army or 2 spent armies. And I think Russia is going to spend 2 to create the Russian 11th Army in Brest-Litovsk. And that will be the extent of all of their production. And that's going to complete all the actions for the Eastern Allies. There is no regroup to deal with on the east. So this is what we have at the conclusion of the Eastern Allies portion of the turn. So we'll move on now to the Central Allies. And they're going to draw their event card. And they draw the card Balkan War Veterans, 1914 plus. +1 DRM, all defending Serbian armies this turn. All right, we're going to place that card near Serbia as a reminder. So we'll move on to the Central Allies movement phase. Now, given the realities of this Balkan War Veterans card, giving them a +1 plus the mountains there, I'm not going to do any offensive operations in Serbia. We're going to focus completely on the Russian theater. And I think what we're going to do is try a 2-pronged attack. I'm going to have the 1st Army attack Poland. Now that's an ungarrisoned location, so there's a special attack procedure for that. And I think we'll have the 2nd Army, with the support of the artillery, attack into Brest-Litovsk. I think that's what we'll do. And we'll begin with the attack on Poland, attacking an unoccupied enemy area. The attacking player designates the fresh friendly army that would be attacking the adjacent unoccupied enemy-controlled area that the opposing alliance originally owned. If the designated area is a mountain, swamp, or production or flag area, the garrison's fixed die roll is 3. Otherwise, it is 2. So that means that the Allies will have a 2 result for this combat. It's a fixed result. So we're going to spend the Austro-Hungarian 1st, and as long as we can roll a 2 or greater, we will win that combat. So we'll make the Austria-Hungary attack in Poland, and we'll see if we can be successful. Anything but a 1, and we'll be in good shape. Here's the roll. And we rolled a 1. The Austro-Hungarian army failed in the attack. Oh boy, see, now that would have been an advantage to us because of the rule. If we end up advancing into that location, any army that is adjacent to that location can also advance in. And that would have allowed the 9th German Army to come into Poland, even though that is, it had operated already during the German turn. The rules are clear. Any armies that are adjacent to that location can be moved in. Well, we failed in that attack. So I think what we'll do is redo the attack with the Austro-Hungarian 3rd Army. That's going to give them their base defense of 2, and we'll try the attack again. We'll see if we're successful. And that time we were. So that spends the Austro-Hungarian 3rd Army. And that's going to allow us now to advance in, and we're going to advance the 9th German Army into Poland as well. And that is going to give us a Central Powers control in Poland. All right. Our next attack will be the Austro-Hungarian 2nd Army from Galicia, We're going to use the heavy artillery, giving us an extra die, and we'll attack the Russian 11th Army. So Germany, or Austro-Hungary, will be rolling 2 dice, the Russians 1. Here's the roll. And Austro-Hungary has a 4, the Russians have a 4. That's a tie. That'll spend the Austro-Hungarian 11th, the Russian 11th Army. And that is going to give the Austro-Hungarians a big push counter. Now we only have 1 army remaining. That's the 4th Army, and I think we are going to hold back on that. Austro-Hungary only has 3 production points. So it was fairly successful, and that is just what we wanted to do. But that's a very important concept in the game, is where any army that is adjacent to that defeated area can be moved in, and that's something we have to take advantage of in this game. So we'll move on to the Austro-Hungarian production phase. We have 3 production points. We're definitely going to be spending 1 point to refit the 5th Army in Hungary. Another point will be spent to refit the 1st Army in Galicia. Gives us 1 production point left. And I think we're going to spend that to refit the 2nd Army in Galicia as well. That will finish up the production phase. We'll move on to our regroup phase, where we can reset our heavy artillery, and that's what they'll do. Reset their heavy artillery. And that is the status of the Eastern Front from the Austro-Hungarian standpoint. And that's going to bring this turn to a close. We'll advance the game turn marker to winter of 1914. We see there that Turkey is going to declare war during the Central Allies turn, and the Turkish units will come on board. This is game turn 2, and it is winter 1914. Turkey is going to declare war on the Triple Entente at the start of the Central Allies player turn. And to remind myself to set up the Turkish forces, I'm going to place the Turkish token ahead of that Central Allies token, and that will remind me to place the Turkish forces on the map and the corresponding British and Russian forces in that theater as well. We're going to begin with Germany's winter 1914 turn, and we're going to draw an event card. And Germany draws card number 21, First Line Formations, 1914 to 1915. Place on a German army. Dice roll modifier of +2 in any combat, or deploy 1 trench at no cost in 1914. Okay, let's see where we're going to place that token. And I think I'm going to place that on the Western Front. We'll place that on the German 3rd Army. Now we'll switch on to the Germany's movement phase, and I think what we're going to do is try to press the attack on the Western Front. I'm going to transfer the 6th and 7th German armies from the Rhine, and we're going to move those into the Somme. And we're going to see if we can continue our assault and try to take Paris. Now we only have 1 army in the Rhine, so we're going to have to probably build 2 or 3 armies here to prevent the French from trying to get in. So that will happen during the production phase. And now we're going to move on to the combat phase, and we'll switch to the East African theater and see what Ledov Vorbeck can do in that area. Well, he is a spent force in Tonga, so all we can do is do a guerrilla attack, and since he's spent only on a result of 6, are we going to do any damage to the British East African Army? Here's the roll. The roll is a 6, and we have successfully damaged the East African Army. That is great. All right. All right, Germany has a total of 7 armies in the Somme, 5 of which are fresh. So we're going to make a attack into Paris, and we'll see if we can drive the Allies out of their capital. I think we're going to just go full out, and I'm going to commit the first line formation's 3rd Army along with heavy artillery support. That's going to allow us to roll 2 dice, and we'll get a +2 to the roll. Now the Allies have 1 elite unit, and that's a first line formations force. I think they will spend that and attempt to defend with the 6th French Army. So we'll see what happens with this. So for this attack, Germany's going to be rolling 2 dice for the heavy artillery. They're going to get a +2 for first line formations. And the British, or I should say the French, will also get a +2 for their first line formations. Here's the roll. And Germany rolls a 6, +2 is 8. The Allies roll a 6, +2 is 8. And we're going to win the tie, and that is going to spend the French 6th Army. German 3rd Army is spent. And these first line formation markers are removed. So we've got our first victory, and we're going to gain the big push token, which is great. We'll add that into the mix. I'll place that 3rd Army in the stack of spent units. And now we're going to continue the attack. I'm going to nominate the German 2nd Army to attack, and they're going to defend with the BEF, the British 1st Army. Now we're going to be back to rolling 1 die each, and Germany's going to gain a +1 for the big push. Here's the roll. And Germany has 6 with their modifier, and the Allies have a 6. That is going to win the battle. The BEF is spent, along with the German 2nd Army. All right, and we will maintain our big push counter. We'll continue the attack, and we'll have the German 6th Army spent, and it will attack the French 1st. Here's the roll. And that time we lost. The Allies have a 4, we have a 2. So the French 1st is safe. We're going to lose our big push counter, unfortunately. And now we have to decide if we're going to continue the attack or not. We have 2 fresh armies remaining. Germany's production will be a total of 12 production points this turn. That will allow them to refit all the armies in the Somme if we do choose to pursue this with all available armies, and then we could still build. It'll cost us 7 points then, and that would give us 5 points left. That would be enough to build 2 armies in the Rhine. So I think we will continue with the attack. We will nominate now the 7th German Army, and he will target the French 1st again, and this time there's no big push, so straight up. Germany won 5-2. That will spend the French 1st, and that's going to get us a big push counter. And we can continue the attack, and I think I will. We're going to use the 4th Army, and we're going to launch an attack, and this time the French 5th is going to defend, and we're getting a +1. And we've won that 5-4. That will spend the French 5th, and we almost had enough points, or enough power here to drive the Allies out of Paris, but we came up short. So we will restack these in the Somme, and our heavy artillery has been spent, but we did a good job on damaging all of those Allied armies in Paris. All right, let's move to the Eastern Front. All right, in the East, I think all we're going to do is the 9th Army in Poland is going to launch an attack into Brest-Litovsk. We have roughly it'll be 1 point of discretionary spending available after we take care of our refits in the West. So I don't want to weaken us too much, because the Russians could still combine and try to drive us out of Prussia. So I don't want to use those forces, but we will use the 9th Army to attack the Russian 5th. and we'll see if we can damage them. Here is the roll. Germany won 2-1. That will spend the German 9th and the Russian 5th. And I think that is as far as we are going to go on the Eastern Front. When the Central Powers kick in, they will have some forces here plus the heavy artillery, and Russia's going to have to worry about that a little bit. So we'll move on to our production phase. And we're going to deal now with our U-boat attrition. We have one active U-boat in the unrestricted warfare box. Here is the roll. We rolled a 2, and that says spent if USA has declared war. Well, that has not happened, so our U-boat will remain fresh. All right, we're going to go on to our production spending, and we'll do our refits. Germany has a total of 12 production, and we're going to spend 7 of them to refit all of our armies in the Somme. That leaves us with 5 production points, and we're going to spend 4 of those to create 2 armies and place them in the Rhine. We'll create the 10th and the 12th armies there. It's going to leave us with 1 point left, and we'll use that to refit our 9th Army in Poland. And that will be the limits of German production. There'll be no money left for transfers. We'll move on to our technological advances, and we'll take care of our research. Germany draws the card Commerce Rating. That's U1. We'll be able to keep that. That is fantastic. Card effects listed on the U-boat attack tables. All right, so we will keep that technology. That is great. We'll move on to our regroup phase, and we'll reset our heavy artillery in the Somme to ready. And that is going to complete Germany's turn, and we'll move on now to the Western Allies. And they're going to begin with their event draw. Western Allies draw the Old Contemptibles, 1914 to 1915. Place on the British First Army BEF. Reroll all defensive dice once. All right, we'll do that. So we'll place the Old Contemptibles on the BEF. Give them some defensive benefits. Now it is the Western Allies movement phase. And I think what we're going to do is use some sea movement, and we're going to transfer the British Second Army into Paris. Paris has a port, so we can directly transfer that, and that's what we're going to do. It'll help to shore up that very sensitive area. Now the French are in a bad way. They've only got production of 3, and they've got 1 production point coming from England from last turn. That'll give them 4 points. So I don't know if they're going to be using too much offensive capability. They have no viable armies to use in Paris. They do have the 3rd and 4th armies and 9th armies in Verdun, and that would be the extent of their offensive capabilities. And I think we're going to pose a question to the Oracle, and we'll ask, do the French go on the offensive during this turn with the given realities? And I would think it to be an unlikely event. So we'll make a roll and see what the Oracle says. Roll is an 11, and that's yes. So the French will take some offensive action. And I guess we have to decide now whether it's going to be in the Somme or in the Rhine. The Rhine, they have to go through the German trenches first, and then they'd be able to launch any attacks they wish in mountain terrain. So I think they will probably use their attacks into the Somme. So we will nominate the French Third Army, and they will launch an attack into the Somme. And the Germans have heavy artillery they can use defensively if they choose. I think we will pass on that, and we'll let the French make the attack. The Third Army attacking the German 5th. Here's the roll. French have won 6-2. So that's going to spend the French third and the German fifth. And I don't know if France can really weaken that theater anymore. So I think they are going to just let that go at this point. And that's going to be the extent of their combat operations on the west. First step in the production phase will be to resolve the U-boat attacks. Germany has one unspent U-boat. Here's the roll. The roll is an 8, and that says success if unrestricted warfare and increase USA entry marker 1 space if the Sussex Pledge is in effect. Well, it's not. So that means that we have success in the North Atlantic, and that's going to degrade the British economy by 1. All right, we're going to convert our transfer production. France has 1 point from the British last turn. I'll give them 1 production point, and they also get 3 more from their standard production. That is taking the Somme out of the effect. So that's going to give France a total of 4 production. And, well, we have to kind of analyze this a little bit. We have 6 German armies that will be bearing down on us next turn. They can theoretically move in 2 more. That would be 8. So we've got the British Second Army and the Old Contemptibles. Those will probably be, the Old Contemptibles will be repaired. So we either spend 3 in Paris and repair 1 in Verdun, or we spend all 4 repairing those in Paris. Paris can only be attacked from the Somme, but Verdun can be hit from both sides. So that's a tough decision. Well, for sure, we're going to repair 3 armies in Paris. So the 2nd, the 1st, and the 6th. That'll cost us 3. And we have to decide what to do with that last point. And I guess we'll consult the Oracle. We'll make this a 50-50. This will be a yes-no. Do we repair the 5th Army in Paris or the 3rd Army in Verdun? So this will be the yes, that'll be the no. Rolls a 4, and that's no, so that means it's going to be the 3rd Army. So we'll spend their last point to repair the 3rd Army in Verdun. That's going to be all of the French production. We'll move on now to Britain. Britain has a production of 7, but they're going to lose 1 to the U-boat attacks, so they're down to 6. And we'll see what we're going to do here. They're definitely going to spend 1 to refit the Old Contemptibles. The Old Contemptibles will be very valuable. That gives us a reroll on a defense. So we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 viable armies in Paris. And potentially there would be 6 German armies in the Somme, and they could move 2 more in. So it's a definite possibility. All right, Britain has 5 points remaining, and I think what they'll do is Britain's going to construct another army for 2 points. We'll construct the 3rd Army. That'll leave us with 3 production left. We'll be able to ship that in then at least. And now we have to decide what to do. Well, the options are to send production points to France or send production points to Serbia. Now, Serbia would cost us 2 points. We'd have to be going through neutral Greece to give them 1 point of production. So I think the Serbs are going to have to be on their own. I think what we'll do is we're going to send 2 points of production to France. And we'll mark them with a 2-point production transfer. And then we're going to use that last point to reconstruct the British East African force. And that will be the extent of England's production. And now we'll move on to our technological advances, and we'll do our research for the Western Allies. And the Western Allies pull counter battery, C1. They're going to be able to keep that. The Western Allies in Russia places 1 heavy artillery unit in any land-supplied area containing at least 1 army of the same nation. That'll allow them to roll 2 dice when attacking or defending. All right. And I think we'll ask the Oracle where we're going to place the Western Allies heavy artillery. It'll be a 50-50, yes for Paris, no for Verdun. Roll is a 10, and that's a yes, so we're going to place that in Paris. That will give them some defensive benefits. Now let's see where Russia's going to put their heavy artillery. Well, I would think the best place to put that heavy artillery would be in a location that can be used defensively. There's basically, they're flanked on 3 sides in Brest-Litovsk, so I think we're going to place that in Brest-Litovsk. That seems to be the most likely place that it would be needed. All right, that is going to complete the Western Allies portion of the turn. We would go on to regrouping, and all the artillery is ready. So we'll move on now to the next turn. That'll complete the Western Allies, and we'll move on now to the Eastern Allies. Eastern Allies will draw their event card. They pull card number 30, First Line Formations, 1914 to 1915, place on an Eastern Allies army. DRM of +2 in the combat. All right. And we have to decide where to place that. It's either going to be with the Russians or the Serbs. And that's a tough decision. I guess we'll place that with the Russians, and we'll place that with the Russian First Army in Lithuania. All right, now we'll move on to the Eastern Allies movement phase. Russia has a production value of 4, so they'll be able to produce 2 new armies or refit up to 4 armies. Now they have 2 spent armies currently. So I think what we'll probably try to do is to pressure the Germans in Prussia. I think that would make the most sense. So we're going to transfer the 3rd Army into Lithuania. And I think that's going to be the extent of the moves. We could also move in either the 2nd Army from Brest-Litovsk, and that would give us an attack force of 4. And that heavy artillery might have been better placed in Lithuania. I think the Russians are going to try it. We're going to move the 2nd Army into Lithuania. We'll keep the heavy artillery there for defensive fire in Brest-Litovsk, because they'll probably be going up against the Austrians. And I think that's the extent of the Eastern Allies movement. And we'll move on to the combat phase, and I think we're going to start with a Russian offensive against Prussia. And we're going to nominate the First Line Formations unit, the Russian 1st. That's going to give them a +2 to their combat roll. And they're going to see if they can get a big push counter. Okay, here is their roll, +2. The Russians have won 7 to 5. That will spend Russian 1st and the German 14th. And that's going to give them the big push counter. And we'll mark that accordingly. Oops. All right. And they're definitely going to be continuing in the assault. They're going to nominate the 4th Army, and they'll attack the German 8th. +1 for Russia. And Germany won 4 to 3. So the 8th Army is intact, and they're going to lose their big push counter. It leaves them with 2 armies remaining that are fresh. If they won both of those, they would be able to push the Germans back. So I think they'll continue the attack. They're going to use the 2nd Army and attack the German 8th. Here's the roll. And they won 6-1. That will spend the German 8th. That's going to give them the big push counter back. And they have one army left, and they're going to do it. The Third Army will attack and attempt to push the Germans out of Prussia. Here's the roll. And they won 6-5. So Germany has the option to attempt to forestall the retreat by sacrificing an army, or they would have to move and retreat into either Posen or Poland. Those would be the options. Germany only has 2 armies remaining in their force pool, so if we were to sacrifice, say, the 14th, we could hold on to Prussia with anything except a roll of a 1, but that army will be completely destroyed and we won't be able to rebuild it. Boy, oh boy. If Germany loses control of Prussia, they're going to be down a production point, and they're almost going to have to transfer units from the Western Front to stabilize that area, depending upon what the Austrians do. I think Germany's going to do it. We're going to destroy the 14th Army, and we're going to use that rule that allows us to forestall the retreat. That army's gone either way, and we're going to roll a die, and we have to do our tenacity test, and we're going to make the roll on anything except a 1 will be successful. We rolled a 4, so that's going to cancel the retreat. The Russian armies are all spent now, and they have really no other armies they can attack with, so we've pretty much stopped the Russian steamroller in the east with that, but we had to sacrifice the 14th Army in the process. Well, in the south, Serbia has 1 army that is fresh. Now, they won't be getting any help from Britain during this turn, so if they were to attack, it will spend the First Army. Both armies would be spent, and then any successful attack in Serbia would drive them into retreat. And they don't have the ability to use that they shall not pass rule like we did, because this is not a production center and it's not a white flag, so they can't use that rule. I think Serbia is going to stand pat, and they will just stay with what they've got, and we'll move on now to the production phase. Serbia has no production. Russia has 4 points, and they have to decide how they're going to spend those. And I think for sure they're going to spend 2 to refit the 11th and 5th armies in Brest-Litovsk. And that will leave them with 2 remaining, and they could either build a new army or refit 2. Ukraine is very thin. I think what they'll do is, boy, that's tough. That is tough. I think they almost have to. Russia's going to construct a new army in the Ukraine. They'll build a half-strength army. That'll be the Russian 6th Army. They'll put that in the Ukraine, and then they'll use their other point to refit the Russian 3rd in Lithuania. I think that might be the best bet. That sure makes Ukraine thin, I'll tell you. And that's going to complete the Eastern Allies, and we're going to move on now to Turkey is going to come online as a Central Powers force, and they're going to declare war on the Triple Entente. So we're going to set up Turkey. So we consult our force pool summary, and Turkey comes online winter 1914. And we're going to place the 1st Army in Gallipoli. That's at full strength. Then they're going to place the 2nd Army at a spent condition in Anatolia. 3rd Army is spent in Erzurum. And finally, the 4th Army is spent, and that's in Damascus. That's the extent of the Russian, I should say the Turkish deployments. Now, when the Turkish army deploys, the Caucasus Army also deploys in Kars, and that is in a spent condition. Also at the same time, the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force will deploy in Sinai, and that is in a spent condition. And the Indian Expedition Force will deploy in Basra at full strength. And that is the limits of the deployment for Turkey and its neighbors. Now we're going to draw the Central Allies event card. And they draw the card number 27, First Line Formations. 1914 to 1915, place on a Central Allies army. DRM of +2 in any combat. All right. And I think the Austrians are going to place that on the Austrian First Army. And now it's the Central Powers movement phase. Now in this, since Turkey activated, there's a little bit different rules in the movement. We can undertake our normal 2 movements with the Central Powers, Central Allied Powers. So we'd have 2 movements which would include Austrian units, Bulgarian units, or Turkish units. But Turkey's going to get their own independent movement as long as we don't move more than 2 Turkish armies in a turn. So it gives us a free move with the Turkish units. As much as I'd like to go after Serbia, I think we're going to concentrate on the Russians. So I won't be making any movements. Now, Italy is neutral. Now, they were technically a part of the Central Powers, but they opted out of joining the Central Powers because they issued an offensive war. And their treaty was that they didn't have to abide by that if it was a result of an offensive war. When Germany declared war on Russia, that was the end of Italy, and eventually Italy is going to come on the side of the Triple Entente. So we're going to have to keep that in mind. During 1915, Italy can come online at any time. So I think Austria is going to hold on the Serbian front, and we're going to concentrate our attacks in Russia. And I think we're going to make an attack into Brest-Litovsk. I'm going to nominate the Austro-Hungarian First Army with its first-line formations supported by the artillery. It's going to allow us to roll 2 dice. Now the Russians will defend with the Fifth Army, and they're going to use their Russian artillery defensively. So both sides will be rolling 2 dice, and the Austrians will be gaining a +1. So we'll see what happens with this. So here is the Austrian attack. The Austrians won 4-2. They get the +1 for the first line formations. That's going to spend the Austrian first and the Russian fifth. And they're going to gain the big push counter. So they're going to continue the attack. The Second Army will continue. They'll be targeting the Russian 11th, and they'll be gaining a +1 for the attack. Here is the Austrian attack. The Austrians won 6-4. That will spend the Russian 11th. And Austria has 1 army remaining, and I think they're going to take advantage of it. They'll spend the 4th Army and try to kick the Russians out of Brest-Litovsk. Here's the roll, +1 for Austria. And they've done it, 6-2. The Russians are in retreat. And we'll have to see where they're going to retreat to. All right, the Russian artillery is going to retreat into Lithuania. The other 2 armies will retreat into Minsk. And the Austrians can move forward. Now they have to move the 4th Army in for sure. I think they'll move in and these other armies can also advance. The 9th German will advance, and the Austrian 3rd will advance. We'll move those in, and I'll have to think about that. I think that's going to be the limits of the advance. We'll place a Central Powers control marker in Brest-Litovsk. And I think that's going to be the end of offensive operations, at least in the Russian theater. We're going to take a look at Turkey next. Technically, I should have made the moves for Turkey as well, and I didn't do that, so I'm going to take care of that now. They would have one movement available. They're going to move the Fourth Army from Damascus into Jerusalem, and they're going to threaten that Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai. So there won't be any attacks from Turkey during this turn. The Ottomans will remain quiet. So we'll move on to the production phase. Now, Turkey has a production level of only 1. So they're going to spend that point to refit the Turkish Fourth Army in Jerusalem. That makes the most sense, and that puts lots of pressure on the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force. That will be the limit of Turkey's production. The Austrians have a total of 3 production points, and they're going to spend 2 of those points to refit the armies in Galicia. The first and second armies will be refit. Leaves us with 1 production point remaining, and I think we will refit the Third Army in Brest-Litovsk. And that will be the extent of Austrian production. We'll move on to the regroup phase, and the Austrian artillery is reset in Galicia. And that's going to bring the turn to a close. Turn marker will advance to the spring of 1915, and trenches are now available. Germany is up next, and this is a spring turn now. We'll be adding in our 1915 event cards into each of the decks. And during the German which is great. And now we're going to move on to the German movement phase, and Germany has to decide what they're going to do. Their 2 choices are to use a pincer attack and attack Verdun and try to take that location out, which would be also a production site for France. It would reduce them down to 2 production points if they're successful. And the other option is to make a big attack and try to take out Paris. And we have the ability to do it. Now the problem is, pretty much all the attacks would have to be successful to do it. We have heavy artillery, but so do the Western Allies. On the Eastern Front, we have a spent 8th Army in Prussia. So I think what we're going to do is this. We're going to make the play for Paris. I'm going to move in the 12th Army from the Rhine into the Somme. Then we're going to move the German 9th Army from Brest-Litovsk into Prussia. That'll leave the Austrians here to hold the line. And we're going to try to make our big push on Paris. The reason being, the spring 1915, the Allies and the Germans and everybody can start entrenching. So once the trenches are built, it's going to make our job a lot harder. So I think we have to go for it now. So we're going to move on to our combat phase, and we will begin with the attacks on the Western Front. And I'm going to nominate the 12th German Army, the one that just arrived from the Rhine, along with heavy artillery support. The Allies are going to defend using the old Contemptibles, which is going to give them a reroll, and heavy artillery. So each side is going to be rolling 2 dice. And we'll see what happens. Now the British old Contemptibles can re-roll their dice. That would be both of them. Okay, here is the attack roll from Germany. And the Allies won 6-4. There's no need to use the old Contemptibles reroll. They've already done it. So the German 12th is spent. The old Contemptibles are still full strength. That is not what Germany wanted. We either continue the attack into Paris, or we shift and try to take out Verdun. Boy, oh boy, that's a tough decision. Germany would need a total of 6 victories to drive the Allies out, and they could still use that "they shall not pass" rule, which they probably would. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to redirect our attacks against Verdun. And I'm going to do that from the Somme. So the first one will be the German First Army is going to assault the trenches in Verdun. So we'll send the First Army against the trenches and we'll see if we can breach them. They're not spent at this time. Germany won 6-4. That is going to breach the trenches. First Army is viable, and they are going to launch an attack on the French Third Army. Here is the roll. And Germany won 6-6. That's going to spend the Third Army and the German First Army. And Germany's going to gain the big push counter. This could be very interesting. Germany has the big push. They'll continue the attack. Third Army will attack the French 4th at a +1. Germany won 6-3. That will spend the French 4th and the German 3rd. And they're going to continue. This time the German 2nd Army is going to attack. And we'll see if we can take out the French 9th. +1. And Germany lost that one, 4-3. So the Second Army is spent. Germany will lose their big push counter. And they're going to continue. And they will use the Sixth Army to attack. Attacking the French 9th. And Germany won 6-2. That will spend the French 9th. Germany has 2 armies remaining. They're going to gain the big push counter back, and they will continue. The 7th Army will attack. +1. And they've won 5-5. That will force the French into retreat. Now, does France want to use "they shall not pass"? And I think they will. They're going to sacrifice the French 9th Army. And they're going to have to make their roll to see if that is enough to stop the German attack. Now, they still have another attack they might have to undertake. If they lose Verdun, their production is down to 2. I think we're going to make a roll on the Oracle. And this is going to be a yes/no, and we'll ask the question, do the French use "they shall not pass"? Now, as for the likelihood of this, I would say it's between 50-50 and unlikely. So, knowing that, I think we'll just make a die roll to start out with to select the category. And it'll be a 1, 2, or 3 for 50-50, 4, 5, or 6 for unlikely. It's a 6, so that'll be the unlikely category, and we'll make the roll and see if they are going to use that rule or not. Yes or no? Roll is a 5, and it's no. So the French will retreat from Verdun. They have no option other than to move into Paris. The trenches are going to be destroyed when Germany advances in there. So the 7th Army has to advance into Verdun minimum. The trenches would be destroyed. And the 4th Army has not attacked yet. So we have to decide what we're going to move in there. Definitely the 17th and the 10th German armies are going to advance in from the Rhine. The trench remains. And we have to decide if we're going to move in any more forces from the Somme. I think Germany is going to move in 2 of their spent armies into that area. And we're going to be able to entrench now, which will be very interesting. We haven't taken Paris, but we've got Verdun. That is amazing. All right. Now, Germany still has 3 armies that have not been spent yet. The 17th and 10th in Verdun and the 4th in the Somme. I think we're going to hold with the gains we have. And I think we'll switch to the East African campaign, see what Letov Vorbeck will do. Vorbeck has a spent force in Tonga. He'll use his guerrilla attack against the British. And he's only going to be successful on a 6. And he failed, so no help there. Now in the east, Germany only has the 9th Army available. And their target would have to be Lithuania. And I think they will do that. They're going to launch an attack from Prussia. The 9th Army will attack the 3rd Russian Army in Lithuania. Now they've already used their artillery, so that won't be available for them. So we'll make the roll and find out if the German attack is successful. And this is basically designed to just limit what Russian forces would be available to them. If we can get a hit against the 3rd, that'll lessen the amount of damage we'll have to sustain in the next coming turn. Here's the roll for Germany. The Germans have won 6-6 on the tie. That will spend the German 9th and the Russian 3rd. And that is the extent of Germany's attacks on the Eastern Front. We'll move to the production phase. And we'll begin with our U-boat attrition roll. We have 1 unspent U-boat. Here's the roll. Germany rolls a 4, and that's spent if Belgium is not Central Powers controlled. Well, it is, so we will not have to spend that U-boat. That is great. Germany has 12 production points. We're definitely going to be spending 2 to refurbish our 2 armies in Prussia. So the 8th and 9th are refit. Leaves us with 10. And we're going to use those, I think, to refit our armies on the Western Front. And we also can use some trenches if we choose. So we're going to refit all those in the Somme. That's going to cost us a total of 4 points to refit those in the Somme. That'll leave us with 6. And then we're going to refit 3 armies in Verdun. That'll cost us 3, leaving us with 3. Got 3 points left, and Germany has an advantage in trench warfare. They can not only, does the cost 1 point for a trench, they can build 2 trenches in the same area if they choose in the same turn. Normally you can't. You can only develop your trenches 1 at a time. But Germany's very good with the spade. So I think what we'll do, Germany is going to purchase 2 trenches, and we'll place 1 in the Somme and 1 in Verdun. That'll cost us 2 points, leaving us with 1 production point remaining. Now we don't have to worry too much about the Russians. They have been pretty much spent. Their force is pretty much spent all the way around. It's amazing. Germany has 1 production point left, and I see 3 options. We could use that to build a 2nd trench on the Western Front. We could refit our 2nd U-boat, which I would really like to do. Or we have to give some support to our Austro-Hungarian allies. Now that Italian front could be opening up at any moment. So I think to be on the safe side, we're going to do a transfer to Austria-Hungary. So we will use that last point of production, and we're going to transfer 1 point of production to the Austrians. And that's going to bring Germany's production phase to a close, and we'll move on now to our technological advances. And Germany draws P3, Jägerstaffels formed. Well, we can't keep that card because our current aerial level is P1, so that has to go back into the draw pile. Our last step is the regroup phase, and we're going to reset our heavy artillery, and we're going to be able to employ our Central Powers air superiority marker without having to roll for a dogfight, and that was because of our aerial reconnaissance card that we drew, and that'll allow us to place that air superiority marker wherever we wish, and our choices would either be Verdun or the Somme. And where is the most likely attack from the French going to be? Germany has 5 armies in Verdun, and we have a total of 5 armies in the Somme. Somme has the heavy artillery, so I think we'll put the air superiority over Verdun. And we'll do that. And that's going to bring Germany's turn to a close. And we'll move on to the Western Allies, and we'll begin with their event card draw. And they draw the card number 40. Allies army. And I think the French are going to place that on the French First Army, inspired leadership. And now it's the Western Allies movement phase, and for sure we're going to be transferring by sea the British Third Army. That'll be moved into Paris. And I think that's going to be the extent of the Western Allies movement. We'll move on to the combat phase. And now the Western Allies have to decide what they're going to do. Do they push in the Somme or try to retake Verdun? Each one has its own defensive benefits. Germany's got air superiority in Verdun, and they have heavy artillery in the Somme. I think the Western Allies are going to go for the Somme, and we're going to attempt an attack with we'll start out with the British, and we'll use the British Third Army to attack the German forces in the Somme. Germany has heavy artillery and trenches. So we'll see if actually I should not spend that because they have to go through the trenches first. So we'll see what happens with that first. So the British Third Army is going to assault the German trenches in the Somme. Here is the roll. And the Germans won 5-2. That will spend the British Third Army. Do they keep assaulting the trenches or not? I guess the British Second Army will do that, and they'll try it. Second Army against the German trenches. And they won. Trenches have been breached. Second Army is not spent, and they're going to go after the German Fifth Army. Germany has heavy artillery. They can use that defensively to add an extra die on their defense. And we have to decide if we want to use that or not. I think Germany is going to try to save that artillery, so the British Second Army is going to be spent, and they're going to launch an attack on the German Fifth. Now, you don't get a big push counter for breaching the trenches. You have to actually defeat an army to get that. So here is the roll. And Germany won 5-4. So that's not going, the attack is not going well for the Allies. Now, French production is going to be cut down to 2 points this turn, and they have 2 production points being sent over from Britain. So I don't know if they can continue this attack or not. It's not looking good for the Allies, not at all. I think the British will continue. They're going to use the old contemptibles and launch an attack. That'll spend the old contemptibles, the BEF, and we'll see if we can get the big push counter. Here is the roll. Attacking the German 5th. No artillery. And they were successful. The BEF won 6-1. That will spend the German 5th. And the Allies are going to gain their big push counter. Now, whether they choose to continue the attack or not, we have the French 2nd, French 6th, and the French 1st. Those are the available armies that we have. I think we're going to have to consult the Oracle. And this is going to be just a simple yes or no, and that is, do the French continue the British attack? And I guess we'll call this a 50-50. The roll is a 9, and that is yes. So the French are going to continue the attack, and I think they're going to throw in their inspired leadership First Army. They're going to gain a +1 to this, and Germany could use their heavy artillery to try to stop this. I think they'll hold off on that. So the French First Army is going to gain a +1 for the attack, and they have a possible re-roll. Here's the roll. And the French won 5-3. That will spend the German 12th and the French 1st. It leaves France with 2 viable armies left, the 2nd and the 6th. I don't know if they're going to continue that or not. I guess we'll make another Oracle roll and find out. And this will be probably unlikely. And we'll make the roll and see. This will be a yes-no. Do the French continue the attack? Roll is an 11, and that's yes. So they are going to continue. The 2nd Army will be spent, and they're going to attack the German 1st Army. +1. Here's the roll. And they won. They lost 5-4. So that is the end of their big push counter, and I think that's it for their attacks on the Western Front. They did some damage, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to save Paris. We'll see. Now in East Africa, the British have an advantage here, and they could drive Vorbeck back if they're able to win. I don't know if they have the production points to spend, though, to try to have to refit that army. I think we'll take a risk. The British East Africa force will be spent, and they're going to launch an attack into Tonga. Here is the roll. And they won 4-3. That's going to drive Letov Vorbeck back. He has to retreat back, and the expeditionary force will move in and capture Tonga. And this is the situation in the Near East. We've got the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai spent, but a viable army in Basra. Now, if we attack Baghdad, that is an undefended location, that would give them a nominal result of 2, but we would have to advance into that location, and then on the Baghdad track, it costs 2 points to refit an army. So I think the British will hold off on that for the moment. And now we're going to move on to the production phase, and we'll have to see what happens with the U-boats. This will be the U-boat attack phase. And there's 1 unspent U-boat in the unrestricted box. So we'll make the roll and find out what happens. Roll is a 10, and that's success if Germany has U-1 technology, which they do. So that is going to damage the British economy. And we'll place the U-boat attack marker there, -1 production. Allies are in a tough way. Well, with the French loss of Verdun, their production is down to 2. They have 2 production points coming online from England, so they'll have a total of 4 production for the turn. but that's really becoming a problem. So France has 4 production, and we'll see what they're going to do with that. Now, entrenchments are available, but I think we're going to let the British build those. So we'll concentrate on refitting our French armies. So we're going to refit these 3 armies here. That'll cost us 3 points. That'll be the French 4th, 3rd, and 5th armies. That'll be 3 points. And we will also refit the 1st Army, which has that Western Allies inspired leadership counter. And that'll be all of the French production. Next up is Britain. They're going to get 7, but they're going to lose 1 to U-boat attacks. So they've got 6 points to spend. And they're definitely going to be refitting their armies in Paris. That'll cost them 1, 2, and 3 for the old Contemptibles. It'll be a refit of 3 points, giving us 3 remaining. And we have to decide now. I think the best bet would be to build a trench for 2 points. That can be at least deployed immediately, whereas if we build an army, that won't be available for the defense. So we'll spend 2, and the Western Allies will build a trench in Paris. And that might help a little bit. And we'll place that there. That gives Britain 1 point. Now the East African army is spent, but we have taken Tonga, so even in the event that Vorbeck was successful, it would just drive us back into British East Africa, so I won't worry about that too much. And I think we don't have much of a choice. We're going to have to refit the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force in Sinai. So Britain will spend their last point and will refit the MEF in Sinai, because the Turkish army could technically drive us out of the Sinai if they were successful. And now we'll move on to the technological advances, and we'll do some research for the Western Allies. And they pull the card A2, that's planned barrages. Now they do not have A1 technology. At the bottom it says if the opponent has A2, you may take A1. Germany does not, so they will not be able to keep that card. And finally, it's the regroup phase, and all that we're going to be able to do is reset our heavy artillery in Paris. And that is it. So that's going to finish the Western Allies. Things are looking grim for them in the Western Front. And we'll move on now to the Eastern Allies. And things are looking not too good for them either. We'll start by drawing the event card for them. And they draw the card number 49, Lusitania sunk, 1915 plus. Flip. So USA entry is flipped to the Lusitania side, and that's going to move up 2 points. When it gets to 8, the United States will declare war on Germany. And now it is the movement phase for the Eastern Allies. Now they only have 1 army that is unspent, and that's in Ukraine. So they're going to try to have to stabilize this front a little bit. In Prussia can only strike at Lithuania, so we kind of know that. But the Austrians are probably going to have a pretty good chance at either hitting the Ukraine or possibly in Minsk. So I think what we'll do is we'll transfer the Russian Third Army in its spent condition to the Ukraine. And I think that's the limits of movement. There won't be any moves in the Serbian front. Russia's production is only 4, so they have many more than 4 points, 4 units that are spent. So I think they are going to just hold still, and we'll move into the production phase. So the Russians have 4 production points, and we have to try to stabilize the front a little bit. Definitely going to be using 1 in each of these areas. That'll be 3 of their production. They have 1 remaining, and we'll have to decide where to use that. Lithuania could be hit from two sides, so I think we'll place that in Lithuania. So we'll have 2 fresh armies in Lithuania, and that's going to be it for Russian production. So we will move on now to the regroup phase, where the Russian artillery will be reset, and that's going to finish their turn. And next up is going to be the Central Allies, and we'll draw their event card. And they draw card number 46, Mustafa Kemal, 1915 plus. Place on a Turkish army, dice roll modifier of +1 when defending. Well, I think we're going to put Mustafa Kemal in his historic location, which is at Gallipoli. So Mustafa Kemal will take command of the 1st Ottoman Army in Gallipoli. And now the Central Powers are going to, allies are going to take care of their movement, and we'll see what we're going to do here. Austro-Hungary will probably be on 3 fronts pretty soon once the Italian front opens up. So I'm wondering if we should try to knock Serbia out or not. It would take a transfer of the artillery and probably another army into Hungary, and we might be able to do that. We're going to have a total of 4 production points with the gift from Germany. So let's think about that. And I think the Austrians are going to use one of their movements. We'll transfer the 3rd Army into Galicia. And I think we're going to launch an attack into the Ukraine using the heavy artillery. I think that'll be it for the movements. And we'll switch to the Turkish area. I think Turkey is going to move their 2nd Army into Baghdad. That'll give them a little bit better defense than just having the garrison there. And I think that is the extent of the movement, and we'll go to the combat phase. Now, one problem, we can't send any support to Turkey until either Bulgaria comes into play, or if we drive the Serbs out, and then we would be able to send support through to Turkey, because you can only send it through one neutral country. So if Bulgaria doesn't come online, we can't really send any support to them. So we'll have the Turks kind of just hold their positions for the time being, and we'll switch to Galicia and the Russian frontier. The Austrians are going to attack into Ukraine. They're going to use their heavy artillery, and they will use the 1st Army to launch the attack. And this will be the Russian 8th will be defending. We're going to get to roll 2 dice for our attack with the artillery. Here is the roll. And the Austrians won 6-2. That will spend the Russian 8th Army and give them a big push counter. And I think they'll continue the attack with the 2nd Army. We'll be gaining a +1 for our big push. Here's the roll. And we've won 3-1. That will spend the Russian 6th Army. And if we can get one more success, we can drive the Russians out of the Ukraine, and we'll do it. We'll spend the Austrian 3rd Army and launch the attack with the big push counter. Here is the roll. And they've done it. 3-3. That will force the Russians into retreat. They have no option because the Ukraine does not have a production site there, so these armies will have to retreat. I think one army will go into the Pripyat marshes, and the other 2 will retreat into Kiev. The Austrians will move, I think, all forces in. All the forces will move in, including the heavy artillery. And that was a great attack for the Austrians. The Austrians have 2 untapped armies in Hungary and Bosnia, and theoretically we would be able to drive the Serbs out if we could get the successes, but they're in mountain terrain, so I think we're going to leave the Serbs alone for now, and we'll move on to the production phase. The Ottomans have one production point, and I think we'll use that. We can refit either the second army or the third. I think we'll refit the second in Baghdad. That'll be the extent of Turkish production. The Austrians have a total of 3 production and an additional one from Germany. So we'll see what we're going to do. We definitely want to refit our 10th Army in Austria because the Italians could come on at any time. That'll leave us 3 points of refit. We'll spend 1 to refit the 4th in Brest-Litovsk. And we have 2 points remaining. We could entrench. That would be a possibility. I think we're going to use those to refit some armies, though. We'll spend the 2 to refit 2 armies in the Ukraine. And that will be the extent of Austrian production. Move on to our refits phase, and we can ready our heavy artillery in the Ukraine. And I think that will be the extent of the Austrian and Turkish moves.